February 2025. A Manhattan boardroom, NBC executives sitting around a table with two columns of numbers in front of them. On one side, veteran WNBA players, champions, Olympic gold medalists, women who flew commercial, played in half-empty arenas and kept a struggling league alive for 2 decades. On the other side, one 23-year-old rookie who had played exactly one professional season. The executives did not debate. They did not consult historians. The numbers made the decision before anyone opened their mouth. And just like that, careers that had survived injuries, low salaries, and years of being ignored by mainstream sports media ended. Not with a dramatic confrontation, not with a press conference, with a spreadsheet. This is not just a basketball story. This is one of the most brutal karma arcs professional sports has ever seen, and we are going to connect every single dot. To understand the fall, you have to understand how bad things were before she arrived. The Indiana Fever, the team that drafted Caitlin Clark in April 2024, had become a symbol of everything wrong with the WNBA's market position. Average home attendance hovering around 4,000 fans in a 17,000-seat arena. Rows and rows of empty seats. A crowd so small you could hear individual conversations from across the gym. Tickets practically being given away. Road teams were not requesting bigger venues. Broadcasters were not fighting over rights. Corporate sponsors were not lining up. The Fever were not just bad, they were invisible, and they were not alone. On a good night, a WNBA game might draw 400,000 television viewers. On a slow night, some games pulled fewer than 100,000. A mid-tier college football game on a regional channel pulled more eyeballs than that. Players flew commercial because the league could not afford charter flights. Networks treated WNBA broadcast rights like a charitable obligation rather than a business opportunity. The league existed, it competed, it produced genuine world-class athletes, and almost nobody outside of hardcore fans was paying attention. That was the landscape when Caitlin Clark walked in. What happened next was not gradual. It did not build slowly. It flipped overnight like someone threw a switch. The moment she was drafted, something shifted in the atmosphere around women's basketball that nobody had ever quite felt before. Season ticket sales for the Indiana Fever jumped 300% in a single week. Not a month, 1 week. Road teams started calling arena managers asking to move Fever away games to larger venues because their normal facilities could not handle the demand. Her first professional game drew 2.4 million television viewers. Nearly 6 times what the league had been averaging on a good night. Before she arrived, an Indiana home game might generate around $50,000 in ticket revenue. After she arrived, that number jumped past $300,000. Before she arrived, WNBA merchandise sales had been stagnant for years. After her first season, league-wide sales jumped by double digits. Peacock tracked a 35% increase in subscriptions during the WNBA season and traced the bump almost directly to her games on the platform. The rising tide did not just lift the Fever's boat, it lifted the entire fleet. You would think the players who had spent years fighting for the league's survival would have looked at those numbers and said thank you. You would be wrong. Diana Taurasi, one of the greatest players in the history of the sport, a 5-time WNBA champion and Olympic gold medalist, went on a podcast before the season even began and started talking about how Clark would struggle against professional defenders. On the surface, it sounded like honest analysis from an experienced veteran. Underneath, it felt like a warning shot, a reminder of who owned this territory and who was just visiting. Other veterans followed. They started doing interviews where they conspicuously avoided saying Caitlin's name, like acknowledging her out loud would give her more power. Then the hostility stopped being verbal. Chennedy Carter's shoulder check became a national news story almost immediately. The contact was so deliberate, so obvious that casual fans who had never watched a WNBA game in their lives saw the clip and understood exactly what they were looking at. This was not a hard foul in the flow of competition. This was a message. An Angel Reese sitting on the bench clapped. She celebrated it like Carter had just hit a game winner. Flagrant fouls that referees let slide. Hard screens thrown at Clark away from the ball. Trash talk that crossed the line from competitive banter into something more personal and more pointed. Social media posts throwing shade at the attention she was getting. Podcast appearances where veterans complained the media was being biased. The fans noticed all of it. And they started asking a question the veterans really did not want asked. Why are these players mad that someone is finally bringing their league attention? It was a question that did not have a comfortable answer. February 2025. NBC announces a massive media rights deal covering both the NBA and the WNBA. Billions of dollars across the full agreement. The WNBA portion representing the largest broadcast contract in the league's history. Everyone expected NBC to build their promotional campaigns around the league's royalty. The champions, the legends, the public faces of women's basketball for 2 decades. Instead, NBC put Caitlin Clark on NBA broadcasts, not WNBA coverage. NBA coverage, the biggest stage in American basketball. She is on screen with Vince Carter and Carmelo Anthony during pregame shows. She is analyzing LeBron James' footwork and breaking down Steph Curry's off-ball movement for a national audience. She's being treated not as a women's basketball player doing a favor for a sister league, but as a credible basketball voice on the most prominent platform the sport has. Meanwhile, Diana Taurasi is not in NBC's promotional material for the league she helped define. Breena Stewart, a two-time WNBA champion, is invisible in Peacock's marketing campaigns. The women who built the foundation that NBC just paid billions to stand on are not in the commercials. Caitlin Clark is. A Clark game on Peacock was pulling over 1 million viewers. A comparable WNBA game without her pulled around 300,000. That is a 70% drop in viewership between one player's presence and her absence. NBC did not build their strategy around Clark to make a statement. They built it around her because she was the strategy. The veterans had become, in the cold language of media economics, background noise. Then came the moment that sealed everything. The WNBA Players Association started making noise about a potential strike. Better pay, improved working conditions, charter flights for every team, legitimate demands on paper. Under normal circumstances, a strike threat is a powerful negotiating tool. Except this was not normal circumstances. The owners had leverage they had never had before. And the source of that leverage was the same person the veterans had spent 2 years trying to undermine. Because if the league went dark, Caitlin Clark would be fine. She was already on NBC's NBA programming, she had endorsements, she had a platform that existed completely outside the WNBA's schedule. She did not need the season the way the veterans did. No WNBA season meant no games for the veterans. No games meant no exposure. No exposure meant the endorsement conversations got even harder. Reports surfaced that some players were privately urging union leadership to back off. They were starting to see the math. They were negotiating from a position of weakness at exactly the moment they needed strength. And that weakness had been built by their own choices during Clark's rookie season. Nike pulled out of a Super Bowl ad entirely rather than navigate the battlefield the veterans had created. State Farm, Gatorade, and Wilson doubled down on Clark without blinking. The corporate world was making the same calculation NBC had already made. The veterans wanted respect. The corporate world responded with spreadsheets. Caitlin Clark never threw a punch back, she never needed to. The revenge did not come from her, it came from the people who write the checks, and those people just decided, loudly, clearly, finally.